Hello, welcome to the second edition of my podcast. My name is Ethan Kahana and I am your host. I am very excited to have Pioneer High School band director Mr. David Leach join me today. A devoted educator, Mr. Leach has been at Pioneer since 2002, having previously taught at Ypsilanti High School for 14 years. Mr. Leach was appointed in 2013 as chair of the Fine Arts Department at Pioneer. Since the beginning of his career as high school band director, he has led multiple bands, both symphony and jazz, to numerous awards. These include top ratings at national festivals and 2 National GRAMMY Signature School Awards, among many others. He has also won individual awards, including the 2006 and 2010 Michigan District 12 Band Teacher of the Year, and has been nominated 4 times for Disney's American Teacher Award. In addition, Mr. Leach has received public praise from international composers for his skills in conducting their compositions. Mr. Leach has taken his students on international tours to play in famous concert halls, including Carnegie Hall, and with esteemed local bands. After participating in his program for 4 years, I can say that Mr. Leach has been both a life-changing teacher to me and a great mentor. Thank you for joining my podcast, Mr. Leach. Welcome.
Thanks, Ethan. It's great to be here.
So, during this unprecedented time of COVID, it's difficult for most teachers to teach online, but especially for music teachers, as I talked about with Jack Wagner last week. So, with teaching big groups, how has your experience been teaching in band during COVID?
Well, actually, Ethan, it's interesting that you talk about that. We started in the summertime, kind of figuring out, we none of us liked what happened in the spring, and I have to be super honest with you. I don't think anybody in education liked what happened, and when we were forced into teaching virtual, like in March, April, it was quite stark. There were lots of parameters put on by districts and states about taking care of kids who do have instruments, who don't have instruments, and it kind of became an academic written part of what we did. Very little playing, which is not who we are at all. And so over the summer, myself, Mr. Glave, the orchestra director at Pioneer High School, and a bunch of colleagues around the country heard about a piece of software called Upbeat Music app. Mr. Glave did the lion's share in the heavy lifting, but we started to kind of hear about this in the summertime. And so as the tail end of the summer got here and we realized band camp wasn't going to happen and all these things we were trying to plan, we thought, okay, we've got to find some way to get the collaborative nature of music, because music is not just about sitting down and playing your part. And you know that. You've been in small jazz combos and big symphony bands. It's not just I sit down and play my part when it says and I leave. That's not what band is. Band is the collaborative learning, problem solving, communication, musically, verbally, physically, all those things happen. And all of that stuff went away. And so we looked for a way to kind of bring that back. And upbeat music is as close as we could get. I mean, you could never solve the lag between the distance. So you and I could never play duets because the lag of distance and internet allows us not to hear what the other person's doing. So that's not feasible to solve. Only physical proximity solves that and working together. But the next best thing we could do is try to figure out a way to engage them collectively. So we found upbeat music and we started to kind of figure out what it was and how to use it, how to implement academically, curricularly, and what we were going to do with it. So the backstory of upbeat music is these 2 little nerds wanted to play duets. They were computer programmers, so they kind of wanted to play these duets together, and they figured this algorithm out to basically take 2 performers and merge them. So it's kind of like the Brady Bunch heads. Everybody in a square plays, and it's all aligned, and they're playing at the same time the same point of time in music. So we found out about it and helped them. As I said, Glave is the heavy lifter, but we've given them advice on what we would like to see, how we would like to interact, what the interface looks like, how to do all that. And we kind of released it in fall when school started. We were ready to go. Originally, the Band Association at Pioneer and the Orchestra Association Pioneer were ready to pay for it. There was some resistance in our colleagues because of the cost. And so we thought we would scholarship all of our students at $15 a head so we could get started doing this. And then at the last minute, the district came in, the board sat down, the superintendent supported it and paid for it for everybody across the high schools and some middle schools. And the jazz program at Community, Jack was all part of that. He was instrumental in part of our kind of saying, this is really important to who we are. And so day one of school, we were on it. Kids got access to it right away. And we started putting together little small snippets. So it started with something simple. We started with fight song, those kinds of things, a little scale, a little chorale, just to get people to function in a virtual environment. And then it moved forward. We had our first All Hallows concert in October. We had a surprise seasonal concert just last Monday. And we've kind of moved quickly into kind of getting to engage. It starts as sectionals. So I mean, I'll tell you, if you don't mind, I'll kind of tell you how our day works.
I would love to.
So each kid shows up into Zoom, the whole band. We kind of have a lesson plan through Schoology. By the way, on a side note, Schoology is our grading app. And so that's how we do assignments, grade kids, take attendance, all that stuff happens inside Schoology. And so we meet in Zoom. On the other side of the page is a Schoology. We talk about the assignment for the day. We talk about how the day is going to run. And then we go into breakout rooms inside Zoom. From Zoom, they kind of strategize and listen and talk. And then from Zoom, they exit and go into upbeat music, and they actually go into private recording studios. So they move from one Zoom kind of format to another one. They're all together in a room. And then from there, they break off into recording sessions. They can either do a click track that gives them time in their ears, or they get a backing track, which means I find a recording. I submit the recording as a backing track, and they play along with the recording, which has been huge. And then that in turn takes all those and merges them, and they get a chance to hear themselves play in a section. And that's how we grade them. And then about a month and a half in, Upbeat came up with something called Upbeat Perform. And that was really cool because now we can have the whole band record. Because before, Upbeat Live was like the maximum of like 13 or 9 or 12. And that's just not enough for a band or a choir or even an orchestra. So then they came out with Upbeat Perform, and we can actually record the entire all symphony band can play a track, a section together, and then we can hear it and make adjustments and talk about the kind of some of the engagement of music making together. So, and that's kind of where it went from there. So we do that. So
it sounds like you and Mr. Glaive, among others, had real input about the development of this technology and app. So it must have been pretty cool that this app, you had real input. And did you kind of tailor it based on how students responded? If students responded one way, you would kind of go back to them and say, okay, this is how our students responded. Let's change this, let's fix that. Or
well, I think in most cases, and again, Mr. Glaive's the heavy lifter, we would meet in groups and kind of strategize and talk through a problem. We would have like a mini lesson, just adults, and then what came out of those.
We're freezing.
Hold on.
Can you hear me? Hi.
How's that?
Good.
That just all of a sudden froze. I'm not sure where we left off, but I think we were talking about the developers.
Yes.
And so one of the things that I think the developers did, and they, by the way, they were great. They were very open. We would send them kind of things about what we discovered. And again, not just me. Jonathan met with people all over the country in the state of Michigan. And we would talk about things that went well and things that we would like to see. And they were great about making adjustments. Then once we rolled out to the kids, they were even better about problem solving. So it's funny, these two guys started just as a lark, and they've quit their jobs. They now strictly run Upbeat Music app, and they've been very responsive in solving problems, which is what's great about being part of the beta of a piece of software. I don't know if you've ever done that. So you're on ground level, and so you're adapting to changes. So as changes happen, you're part of the process, and then you see these things that have happened to you fixed. And so it's really kind of cool to have those situations fixed in front of you, and you share it with the kids, and it's kind of empowers you to be more engaged. And so it's been great. I mean, literally, they've been great. Kids have been great, very understanding about how things work.
So one thing that I always loved about your program when I was in it is how much freedom you give the students to have input into picking the repertoire, and really feel like they can lead and be a part of, and contribute to the program. And I think that you give your students a great freedom for that. So during this time of virtual, how do you keep that excitement and sense of responsibility to the students. And are there any positions that you opened up, or are there ways that you allow student input?
Well, I think we talk, you know me well enough to know you've been through my program. We spend time chatting. So part of education is not, and again, I think everybody in the country is figuring this out. Education is not all about disseminating information. So students don't walk in your classroom and you just flood them with information, and then they have to tell you that they've understood it. That's not what education is all about. That is a percentage of education. And as people are finding out, a smaller and smaller percentage of education. We feed the hungry. We take care of the homeless. We help with socially emotional. There's all these things that we do that are far larger than just data transfer. We take care of kids' souls. I mean, you know that as well as anybody. It's a matter of giving them the ability to feel connected and be part of the decision-making process. So as you know, we have a band council. I meet with them every week. And not just the social aspect of it, but how it is, what we're going to do and how and where we're going to move is really important. As a student, when I was a young musician, I was empowered to be part of the process. And I think that helped me be who I was. And I think the same thing goes true for kids. I mean, you were in jazz band where it is really much more student driven. We break off into sectionals. We listen to literature. We go, oh, I like this piece of music. Oh, this is really cool. Or hey, I did this arrangement. I think your brother at one point in time said, I want to do this arrangement. And we said, that'd be great. I mean, look at the initiative of having you get the opportunity to write for a big band in high school. I mean, that's a once in a lifetime skill that we think everybody should have the opportunity to do. So I think giving kids those experiences to take leadership, take the helm and be part of the process is again, the best part of education. I mean, giving them small leadership development skills to bigger, to by the time you're a senior or a DMC or all those things, you're really integral on how we operate. You know, not just showing up to class every day and playing your instrument. It's way more than that. And so we've done that through Upbeat is we've broken off into sectionals. And so they start small, like maybe 3 clarinets, just the first clarinets, and then those move to all the clarinets, and then those move to all the woodwinds, right? And then that moves to the entire band. So we start with the micro and move to the macro, and within the micro, you have a much bigger voice. So in 3 clarinets, you're a third of the conversation. Yeah. So it gives them a chance to kind of flex their leadership muscle and idea to know that it's important, and to give them the recognition. I mean, you of all people know that I listen. And so you come with an idea, let's listen to it. It may be right or wrong, but let's kind of flush it out before we, shoot it down just because it comes from a student. Sometimes those are our best decisions.
Yeah. So one thing that really interested me, going a little bit off this topic, was I heard an interview during your time at Clegg. Tom Millard took over for Roger Lund, and you helped him acclimate as a new band director.
Sure.
And you took that initiative and leadership that you try to instill in your own students. So can you go through the story of that time when you were at Clegg, and when did you decide that it was your responsibility to help this new band director acclimate to the new school?
Well, I think, I'm not sure Tom Millard ended up becoming a great friend, a father figure, mentor to me as much as anything else. We had a very beloved band director, Roger Lund, resign and move to another job in the East Coast because it was a better opportunity. So we had an interim band director who I think was not given a fair shake. To be very honest with you, he did great things down in Texas, and his band played in Midwest. But I don't think Clegg was the right fit for him. And midway through the first year, like December, he decided to resign. So in a period of 6 months, I was on my second, as a first trumpet player, first chair, I was on my third band director. My Mr. Lund had left. The next band director had come. That didn't work out so well. He resigned. So now we're on. Kids liked him a lot. We seem to be frozen again. Oh, the kids liked him a lot, and I liked him a lot. And so I was in the symphony band. Back then it was called concert band and jazz band, and he offered us to be part of the process.
Oh, we're freezing again.
And so it just seemed like I love technology, but it's the middle of the week. How's that better?
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that comes out of all that is and again, I think Mr. Millard and Mr. Lund, and I go to high school, Mr. Whitwell and Mr. Marsh, my choir director, Ms. Datz, all empowered us to be part of the process. And so I think growing up in that environment, I was encouraged to be part of the process. And so I think it's best to encourage kids to be part of the process. I mean, we were integral in those things. And again, he was young, enthusiastic, and we just kind of embraced all that.
Well, so you started your career in music at Northside Elementary studying under Robert Albritton, who eventually became the band director at Pioneer.
Yeah, right before me.
How did he influence your life as a child and an early musician? And how did that relationship grow as you decided to follow in his footsteps and become a band director?
Well, I think I only had him in 5th and 6th grade. And so it's kind of hard I think he started me. I think one of the things that if anybody knows anything about Mr. Albritton, I think he has a very specific way of teaching. And so I think one of the things he did when I was a young musician is, as a trumpet player who had the benefit of a private teacher, we had a trumpet student. My mom worked for the Veterans Hospital, and one of her lab kids was a trumpet player for the Michigan Marching Band. So I got trumpet lessons from 5th grade. And so I was encouraged early on in 5th and 6th grade to go back and help my colleagues who are struggling on trumpet. So I would give maybe many private lessons to a friend to teach valving combinations and how to buzz better. And so that was right away an ability for me to help the process. And if you think about that, where that has led to my teaching, I've empowered my students to do much the same thing. Mr. Albritton and I were much more connected when I became a band director. Again, it's difficult as an elementary school teacher to keep track of all those students. You see them, not very much. And so when I became a band director at Ypsilanti High School, the longer I was there, the closer we got. In fact, we played in a brass quintet together, and I sought him for all kinds of counsel, not knowing that I was going to follow his footsteps. When it became obvious that he was getting towards his end of his career, he reached out to me and said, would you be interested in applying for the job? Because there's no way for any of us to go ahead and here's who's going to replace me. That's kind of not how it works in public education. And so I agreed to apply for the job, although I was extremely happy at Ypsilanti. I had some of the best kids in that school. We traveled the world. I had some great experiences. I can never say enough. I can never show enough gratitude towards my experience at Ypsi. And I still have some of my fondest memories as a young band director with those amazing kids. But when I applied for the Pioneer position, it was really a move to kind of show honor and respect to that program that kind of got to me where I was. And so when I was offered the position, I was thrilled to take it. Pioneer has had a incredibly long history of ridiculously successful musicians, band, orchestra, choir. The depth is outrageous. Theater, we could talk all day long about how great the whole program is. And so it seemed to be the right choice for me. And then I've just gotten there and had the time of my life. Again, like you, I have some of the best kids I've ever met, and have great relationships with them that last a lifetime. And so that's kind of how that happened. And it starts at Northside and went through Clegg, from Clegg to Huron, and from Huron to Eastern, 2 degrees there, and then allowed me to get from Ypsi to Pioneer. And I've been here ever since.
So at Pioneer, we had a lot of student teachers who kind of studied under you. What was your experience? What was your first experience at Eastern Michigan as a student teacher?
I was at Ida High School and middle school with Lloyd Whitehead. It was a huge seismic shift in what I was expecting, because growing up in Ann Arbor, these huge, massive programs with, 90% of the kids studying privately and all Ann Arbor you learn a great deal about work from differing backgrounds. I mean, vastly different than what I grew up in. In fact,
we're freezing a little bit.
Story.
Sorry, we're
freezing again. Let me see if I can. Are we frozen again?
No, now I can hear you.
Okay. So when I got down to Ida, it's such a vast difference from Ann Arbor. It's a country, rural city. I mean, literally one flashing red light in town. to get to the high school, you turn left on the flashing red light, and you turn, or right on the flashing red light and turn left at the silo. That's literally how you get to the high school. And so I can remember Mr. Whitehead tells this story often. We were doing a marching band rehearsal, and all of a sudden this huge bean picking machine starts to drive by the marching field. Ethan, it's like 30 feet tall. It was a massive, huge machine that was loud. And so I stop and I'm staring at it, and all of a sudden this guy gets out and waves to his daughter in the middle of band rehearsal. And I'm just like, and I hear, David, Mr. Leach. And all of a sudden, you know, Mr. Whitehead goes, Mr. Leach, he goes, you need to stop staring at the bean picker and run this rehearsal. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not what I expected in the middle of a marching band rehearsal. And so it was great. The kids were great. The trumpet players down there were so much fun. And Mr. Whitehead said, choir is not my strength. And I was singing in choir through high school, through college. I was a paid soloist in a local church. So he said, the choir is all yours. So basically I was allowed to be the teacher of a classroom while I student taught, with no, other than he was drinking coffee in the office. That was my job, to run that course, and had a great time. And so, you know, I learned right early on to kind of dive in. And I think I let my student teachers do much the same thing early on. They're conducting, they're working with students. And they've turned out to be some really fine teachers. And in fact, one of my favorite is now the director of bands at Huron. That's Rob Ash, and he did a fabulous job. And we've just hired another one. Liam Jackson has done a great job. He was a fabulous student teacher, and now he's teaching in Ann Arbor. So I've been very fortunate.
So when you were teaching the choirs when you were a student teacher, did that kind of allow you the opportunity to develop your vision of how to run a classroom and your pedagogy in any way? And what was the student body like at this rural high school, and the music opportunities, and how does that what were some challenges in teaching there?
I think one of the things it taught me was kids are kids. It doesn't really matter where you come from. And traveling has also played a huge role in that. You go to China, and I'm fortunate enough to have been with China with my band program, and you get away from the political overtones and the things that kind of go on, and you kind of become just kids and kids. No adults kind of playing. We went to an American language school. So there's schools that are run for students to kind of graduate from high school, move off to college, that have a much better command of the English language. And so it's not a school of Americans, it's a school of Chinese who are studying, you know, basically business and stuff in America, and particularly the English language. And those kids,
We're freezing a little bit. Sorry, I can't.
I'm now in an interview, and it's been free 10 times. Thanks. Are you done streaming still? What the hell? All right. Trying to see if anybody else is on, and nobody's on. So I think it's just internet. I don't think it's anything to do with either one of us. So one of the things I think, you know, you're in that situation, and you're with these kids in a foreign country, and you see them all engaged just to be kids. And as I've told my students, I think at the end of the day, no matter the political leanings of your country, as a student, as a child, you just want to be loved. I think that's a safe thing. You want to have food. Help you.
Sorry, I can't.
You'll decide with that passion.
Here we go.
Well, something went wrong. I have no idea what went wrong.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, it's internet. It happens all the time. And so I think.
Oh, I can't hear. Can you please turn your video?
Yep. How's that?
Great.
Good.
Yep.
And so I think watching those kids kind of engage and watching them interact was really all about being a place where you love, where you're loved, where you can find people that you connect with, and then kind of having that food, water, life stuff, and then eventually having a job or a position or a profession or a career that you feel like you give back. And I think those are all things that we all, regardless of political outcome of our particular countries, want. We just want to make a difference. We want to be loved and respected by the people that are around us. And we want to be able to have a place to be safe, eat, drink, find people that we love and care about, and kind of go through life. And I think that's what's important. And so I think that's what my kids figured out and what I figured out pretty early on.
Yeah, I can definitely say from my experience that going on tour, I went to New York and Italy and Croatia and Slovenia, and that trip, it definitely has a big impact on you. And you said that you went on some tours when you were Ypsilanti. So when was your first tour experience, and when did you kind of decide that you wanted to make it's a pretty regular thing every 2 years, and I'm sure it's not easy. So,
well, anytime you travel with a large group, there's lots of logistics, and
mm-hmm.
that's the really big, difficult part of traveling with large groups is logistics. Food, we've talked about that before. Transportation, housing, those are the big logistics. Concert venues are the second tier of logistics. We like to have places where kids can play performances that are not just, you're playing in a courtyard at some hotel. That's not the greatest performance experience. Even if there's somebody there evaluating your performance, that's not the greatest experience. And so these festivals that people establish, while I think for growing programs have their merit, I think for programs that are established, finding a place that is an important performance, whether you're sharing a concert with a town band or whether you're playing for a performance for a local city that you have a relationship with or that you develop a relationship with. I think those are all really important. I think when we traveled to Europe, we played for some amazing places, particularly when we were on your tour, and met some really amazing people, mayors of towns that came to our concerts that were just floored by how well you played, both jazz and concert wise. And so I think those are critical outreaches. Again, if you strip the theatrics of politics, people just want to meet people. I remember when my last tour, we were in Italy, we played a jazz band concert, and the mayor was there, and speaking really fast Italian, and on my other ear there's a guy who's translating. And at the end of the day, what he said was, jazz is so important for this town, Trieste, because the jazz musicians showed up with the American military and freed their town from tyranny. Oh. And so his memory of it is his grandparents who fought in World War II, listening to jazz, Benny Goodman and all the big band charts and Duke Ellington and all these incredible musicians. That music came with those soldiers, and that's what they listened to, and that's what they showed who America was. I mean, that's our true only art form, and it captured the world. It still basically does capture the world. And so when we're playing a big band chart, the mayor's like, this is my nearly in tears saying, this is my grandparents, and talking about, that you helped free our country was huge. And so thank you for showing up with the youth. Thank you for bringing back that music, and thank you for sharing it with us. And so I think that's a universal language thing, that music does bridge those gaps, and those memories, whether they're ours or our families, having indelible impact on who we are as citizens.
So when did tour opportunities kind of come with the accolades that Pioneer was getting, both under Mr. Alberton and under you? Like playing in Carnegie Hall, for instance, because not any band can do that, I'm guessing. So how did you take advantage of the great work that you were doing at home and kind of use it to give your students once in a lifetime experiences?
Well, I think you hit it on the head. I think we all want to give kids a once in a lifetime experience. I mean, I think the appreciation for band camp, if you will, that's a tradition that Pioneers had forever in Interlochen, one of the most beautiful places in the world, and to give kids the opportunity to experience, to be with your friends in a cabin of 13 other friends, and to live that life is kind of an important aspect of who we are, helping students kind of grow. Again, that's the leadership thing, from cleaning cabin to everything else that takes place at band camp. Now you move to travel, it's a thing. We have lots to manage: instrument, music, stands, equipment, all those things go with it, helping get a crowd. And so those are really leadership development and opportunities. When I started traveling at Ypsi, my colleague, Bill Boggs, who was an amazing choir director, was already traveling. And so the band kids were like, hey, can we travel? My first tour there was to Montreal, Canada. And I learned a great deal as a 24-year-old kid, what I thought was feasible, possible, professional, helpful. And I remember those lessons well, and made sure I surrounded myself and hired a company that could guarantee my kids had a great experience. Housing was safe, transportation was done, food was fine, and then wherever we were going, what was a pinnacle thing that was achievable there? If you're going to New York, playing Carnegie Hall is a logical step for great musicians, because the only way to get to Carnegie Hall is to practice.
Mm-hmm.
That's the rule for it. Practice, practice, practice. And I think to get to any of those situations, giving kids the opportunity to see the world from a stage is, not duplicatable in anything else. I mean, playing on the hallowed ground of the Great Wall of China is an experience my kids won't ever forget. We were playing Stars and Stripes on the Great Wall of China. That's a pretty rare achievement by anybody.
Oh, you must get goosebumps from that. Oh, yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. And playing in Carnegie Hall for the first or second or third time is just, you were there. I mean, I'm nearly at tears just saying the people who have stood on that stage making music in this country. It is our quintessential performance hall. And so there are opportunities that kids just as musicians should maybe hopefully have the opportunity to try to experience. And that was kind of our goal.
Yeah, they're definitely incredible experiences. And they make you want to go home and really work at it. I can definitely say that much. When you give a concert, what's your mindset, and do you ever get nervous for concerts anymore? And how do you feed off of that energy?
Every concert, okay, do I get nervous? I think that nervous is probably not the right word as much as apprehensive. My apprehension is I know what you're capable of. And I learned this from my high school choir director and high school band director. They're both, God rest her soul, Ruth Datz was phenomenal about talking to that, because I asked her the same question. And John Whitwell, who's a legendary band director in this country, you may not know him, but was on the Midwestern Director Board. He's just fabulous band director. Talked about the ability to be apprehensive because the potential for amazing. So the kids that are sitting in front of you could play amazing, and the apprehension is, do you put it all together? You've heard me say in the rehearsal, you've played this music, these notes, these rhythms 1,000 times, but can we have that moment of focus where it all comes together? All the articulation, all the intonation, all the phrasing, all the musicianship, all the collaborative nature of this can all happen in one moment in time to create that special concert. That's just really important. When I plan concerts, I think you probably figured out, although you may not have, the arc of my concert is kind of an upward. You kind of move these emotional roller coasters, bringing them up and letting them kind of breathe, and bringing them up and letting them kind of breathe. Those are important aspects of a concert, and to end on something that's really a high note. I try to feature performers and composers of like minds. So if I'm doing a British concert, everybody gets to do a British composer. So I think they should be introduced to those guys. I think if we're doing something heavy by some American powerhouse, John Mackey pounding on an anvil, I think the other bands should also have the experience of something that's new, avant-garde-ish in nature in terms of it's not the harmony is more edgy, and the energy is certainly more high end. I give each band those experiences. So, and it really also depends on the concert. That if we're trying to recruit out of that concert, particularly bands in review, it should be something that takes your breath away. So when an 8th grader sitting in that hall says, "I want to be in that band in 4 years," that's the thing you want to try to get them to feel that that's important. And band is a really amazing experience.
Yeah. So what's the most talented band what's a band that comes to mind that you say they had it? And
wow, so many.
And what's a piece that you played or a concert that you had where you just went out of it saying, we met our expectations?
Gosh, Ethan, so many. I mean, there's not one concert that comes to mind. The first time the Ypsi band played the state conference was called the Midwestern was life-changing just because I was so young. The second time they played it, I think they got a standing ovation in the middle of the concert after playing a piece called Incantation Dance, which was well beyond their skill set. I remember playing a concert in England when the guy had to have been 150, maybe 200 years old, it seemed like, when I met him. And he said he was in the audience back when John Philip Sousa brought the Sousa band to
Wow.
England. And he remembers Bill Ravelli bringing the Michigan band and said, "You're just as good." Well, I knew his hearing was bad because we're definitely not that good. But it was so thoughtful that he basically talked about those two icons in my world. I mean, those are two iconic band directors I think are the best of the best. I can remember at Pioneer playing at a festival in Florida when the judges just basically said, "Here, no one's going to duplicate what you just did." And I said, "Thank you so much, but the festival still has to go on, and we'll see you, after the award ceremony." And I can remember the first time we played the Grammy signature concert. We played Stars and Stripes Forever, and it was just such an amazing occasion. Bob Seger was there. The place just erupted and clapped the band faster than we were supposed to play, but the enthusiasm was there.
Yeah.
I can remember playing in Italy, Hindemith at a church, and I still think some of those sounds are rattling around because the decay and delay were so long. And playing with you in Prague, there's just so many amazing memories playing at jazz festivals at MSU, and the judges are just like, "Wow, your kids are fabulous." And so there's thousands of concerts I can remember. I mean, I could go on forever. I could.
Yeah, that church in Italy was incredible. And I remember we played a slow song. It might have been October.
Yeah, it was October. Yeah, it was
And
Danny.
that was haunting.
Yeah, well, people, even you guys said, sometime you didn't want to play because you just wanted to listen to it. And I'm like, wait, time out. You can't do
real,
that.
yeah.
Because if we all don't
amazing.
play, it's just a few people. Everybody's got to do their job. You do your job, and then let everybody else enjoy it. And you can kind of live in the moment, which you've heard me say a zillion times.
Yes.
Yeah, you're there, and it just becomes that. Food tastes better in a foreign country because you're in that place and you're surrounded by all those. I mean, do you remember Milan? Do you remember that big square? I mean, eating in that big square, I still try to figure out a way to duplicate that risotto because it was, I'll never duplicate the scene, but the memories are so vivid of how fabulous it was.
I remember I tried on like a $3,500 coat or something in Versace or something. It was crazy.
I remember you telling me that. I thought, are you insane? Please don't cut that.
No, exactly.
Your dad will be not happy.
Yeah, the amount of in these tours, the cultures that we're exposed to, it's so fascinating, and it doesn't go away after you leave. It makes you just appreciate it more and more and more. So
well, yeah, I think you appreciate that culture.
Yeah.
So you're in where were we? Slovenia, right? You appreciate. Remember that tunnel we drove through, that stalactites. Remember that?
Yeah.
You couldn't stand up because you would have a concussion, but there was no gate protecting your head. Now that would never happen in the States, but it was so amazing to be there. And we're walking through, seeing this breathtaking experience, and two things come out of it. At the end, you realize how amazing people have it. I mean, gelato in Italy is way better than gelato in downtown Ann Arbor. But you realize how great all that stuff is. And then you realize how lucky we are when you get back home and you appreciate your home that much better.
Yeah.
Because you appreciate the familiarity of the things that you've grown up with. And so I think that's important. That's an important thing. You love what everybody else has, and you appreciate how lucky they are. And then you also remember how lucky you are with all the opportunities that you have.
Yeah. So going back to performances and concerts, when I was in band, we debuted pieces, and there were commissions, and I always thought that was super cool, especially seeing the composer in the audience and playing his piece for him. So when did these commissions begin, and how do they kind of manifest themselves? And what was your favorite one that you've played?
Wow, there's no way to say a singular favorite. One of my favorite memories is the last one we did. Christopher Haas as a graduate of Pioneer High School and wrote a piece of music called Duality. So last year, a year ago now, we were fortunate enough to have Chris at Pioneer High School. He's a graduate. He taught the symphony band. He wrote this piece of music with us in mind. And it was just, incredibly difficult, incredibly challenging. And the kids just rose above and floored the performance. I can remember playing for John Mackey in the audience, and he was quite proud and happy with the stuff that we have done. And I can remember playing commissioned piece of music that we were part of and the sole responsible member of commissioning. When Ann Arbor bands turned 100, I contacted my friends across town, then Steve Roberts, who was the director of bands at Huron, and Jason Smith, the director of bands at Skyline. And I thought, rather than just being a Pioneer experience, because Pioneer was the original high school, Ann Arbor Pioneer High School, I thought it was important that we celebrate 100 years of bands in the city. Mm-hmm. And so we contacted a composer that we think is one of the best, and I happen to think he's one of the best ever. His name is Michael Doherty, and we collaboratively commissioned him to write Vulcan for band. And that was a game changer, because symphony band at Pioneer was the test subject. So he would come in with pieces of the score, and we would play little parts of it. And then he'd go back and revise, and we had a chance to do that's called workshopping. Mm-hmm. That was a incredibly unique experience. And we did the same thing with Chris. But new music, I think it's, that's the thing about band literature and bands in general. It's a young art form. I mean, in terms of the history, symphonic orchestras, choirs have been doing this stuff for decades and decades. And bands are really since, World War II and before World War I, when bands started to become more, John Philip Sousa was kind of the driving force behind the modern American band movement. And so we're young in terms of the scope of history, but the literature grows vastly every year. And so I think you find somebody that you like, you've met, you've heard their music, and you try to promote it by having your kids play it. And I think that's an important part of who we in the modern band world are. And living in Ann Arbor doesn't hurt, because the U of M Symphony Band, and up in East Lansing, the Michigan State Wind Symphony, they premiere stuff all the time. And so you're hearing really great band literature like right away. And it's just great to kind of share that with kids.
I remember when we premiered a piece, the composer, I believe, came to give us like a master class. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in the world of band music and classical music especially, a lot of the composers are no longer alive.
Well, in orchestra and choir, that's definitely true. I mean, the vast majority of their repertoire is people that have been long off this planet. Although it's changing, I think, particularly choir was first to embrace it as well. But in orchestra, you're starting to get a whole lot of really young orchestral composers that are doing some really mind-blowing stuff. And so you're hearing it more. In band, it's going to be that way for a while, because a majority of our composers are all still composing. Yeah. Because we're basically a young form. I mean, before Holst and Granger, Persichetti, and all those guys who are no longer with us were writing, there was really orchestral transcriptions. We would play Pines of Rome, or we would play the band transcription of Deflator Mouth. I mean, that's what we were playing in the band world. That's no longer the case. I mean, yes, there are lots of bands that play orchestral transcriptions, and they're valuable. The technique is the demands to do those are much different than band technique. But band kids are turned on by band music, so you got to continue to promote that art form.
Yeah. So you have taken it upon yourself, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, to really mentor kids who you feel want to follow the path and go into music, or want to become conductors like you. So how do you seek out students who you think would want to become professional musicians, and how do you foster their influence them?
That's an interesting question. I have discussed with this, and someday I may discuss with it more openly with my colleagues. On any given year, and I am luckier than most, about 20%, between 15 and 20% of my kids go off and play their instruments after high school. So of those, probably 15 to 20, maybe even 30% of those kids go off and want to major. So if you do the math, if I'm spending any exorbitant amount of time trying to focus on those kids, I'm failing the other 80%.
Yeah.
So I think what I try to do is provide an experience that anybody can extrapolate success from. And what I mean by that is teaching them skills to work collaboratively. That's the most important skill I think we do. And I think we do it better than almost anything else, better than sport, better than other courses. I think band in particular, because we have to go through the marching component as well as the concert performance, right? As well as, stage performances that are of light nature. I think band really does focus on the collaborative nature of problem solving. If we have to learn a drill, that's a problem solving. If we have to learn a halftime show, or we have to learn stand music, that's collaborative in nature. And it can be kind of intense. Yes, it's a collection of individuals that have to solve their problem. But if I just solve my problem and I don't worry about supporting my colleagues, the problem doesn't get solved. I've just done my little component. And that's kind of important about band. We work collaboratively, solely collaboratively. Yes, we may feature one of us, but at the end of the day, and I look at jazz trios. At the end of the day, if one of the three of you doesn't do their job, you don't sound good.
Mm-hmm.
The three of you don't sound good. So we all got to work together. And so I think I focus on those aspects. If a student comes to me and says, hey, I really want to pursue beyond high school. I want to either be a band director or I want to be a performer, of which I've had lots. I have students that are band directors all over the country, from California, Texas to the East Coast. They figured that out. That was something that became their passion. I do everything I can to support them, helping them gain scholarships or helping them get accepted to the School of Music of their choice, writing recommendations, calling studio teachers to say, hey, I have this really fabulous tenor sax clarinet player by the name of Ethan, and he would really fit in your studio incredibly well. That's what I can do to help. And then when they take that journey, have them come back and have opportunities to teach at their alma mater. Band camp counselors. I can talk about my colleagues, that my former students that are now, Nate Heed is a student of mine who's now a graduate student at Eastern, and he's the undergraduate, music teacher or in the music school in the band program. And that's the journey he took. And he's doing fabulous work there, but that's, making sure that he gets whatever support I can have. So when he came back to band camp, he actually taught marching. I stepped off the tower to let him teach. So he had teaching experience, so that when he went to college, he knew what it was like to teach, a vast majority of people, as opposed to just being able to play his euphonium and symphony band. And so I've said the same thing to Elliot Pollitt and Max Hausner, and you've watched all those guys get chances to teach, and I think that's the way that I can help them, or perform, come back and do a clinic, or run a sectional, or I've had students that have gone to military bands. They come in and do their auditions in front of kids before they have to go to DC and do their auditions. So those are the kind of opportunities that I want kids to take, and be able to give them any support I can.
It's amazing that you give them the opportunity, and it's also probably cool for you seeing them grow as teachers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And
in some case, they invite me into their classroom and I get a chance to work with their kids. There's nothing better. You watch your students become fabulous teachers. You're overjoyed with their success, and that they're, it's a sense of pride of who they become. You've played a small role, but the reality is they've done all the work. So it's just kind of fun.
So kind of jumping off that, it seems that many of your personal mentors growing up were band directors.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you always know that you wanted to go into band directing, or how did they influence you, like you influence people, like you influence your students to teach and give them opportunities?
Well, I think most of them, and I've kept contact with most of them did the same kind of things for me that I do for my students. And I call it paying it forward. And everybody else does the same thing. Provide opportunities to grow and learn and lead and exceed, right? They've not forced me into practicing, or forced me into auditioning for this place, or forced me to do that. It's something that I wanted to try to do. My mentor teachers also became incredible father figures because of who they were to me as a person. The relationship that we had was so strong from my perspective as a young man, showing emotion and playing music and having a profession and growing families and having all these experiences was indelible.
Mm-hmm.
And all of my fondest memories are tied to my music courses. Yes, I liked math. I was not great at it, but I liked math. I liked history. I liked science. But at the end of the day, I couldn't wait to get down to B Hall, right? To be with my friends, to make music, to celebrate art, to have those emotions go through you and learn how to exude emotion musically was something I couldn't get anywhere else. And yeah, I was in sport. I mean, I dove. I got varsity letter when I was a kid. I liked it. I was I was okay at it. But those moments on stage, whether I'm singing in choir, in a musical, playing Little Abner, or playing trumpet in jazz band, those were all indelible moments that I remember clearly. I remember playing at Midwest. I remember playing at Bands in Review. I remember playing at All City. You don't even know what All City is.
What was your favorite moment performing as a kid?
Playing at Midwest was pretty groundbreaking in terms of how huge it was. And as a kid, I didn't know. As I got older, I really realized that. Singing in all kinds of performances, when watching people just become astounded with what we were capable of. And I think that's probably where I get that hunger, because at the end, you're talking to people and they're going, I had no idea a band could sound like that in middle school. You hear that, it sticks with you. You listen to your middle school band playing, people go, my high school, my college band didn't sound that good. And you're listening to middle school kids play. So those memories and conversations stuck with me. And so I've always tried to give my kids the same opportunities to kind of exceed expectations of what kids are capable of. Because you guys are capable of some pretty incredible stuff.
Yeah. So as you diverged into conducting and started your career as a conductor and built this great legacy for yourself, one of the things I respect a lot about you is that you're constantly trying to grow, and I remember you bring other directors to come in and critique you. Mm-hmm. And I always find that really in front of your students, mm-hmm. which not a lot of teachers do.
Yep.
And most don't. When did you, how do you maintain the hunger to grow as a conductor? And how much do you take from other people?
I'm never not trying to find someone has a better way. This past year, actually a year ago, this December, I volunteered and auditioned for the H. Robert Reynolds Conducting Institute at the Midwest. Almost everybody else there was a college graduate student who was trying to become a college band director. But after listening to it the first year, I thought, I'll never have experience to conduct a college ensemble in a small chamber setting. I could get my kids to, but we're never going to do Stravinsky. That stuff's, that's some pretty heady stuff. I'm sure we could probably whip it into shape if we spent half a year on it. But to meet college students for a one-time event in front of two of the best conducting teachers I think are there is something I think if we shy away from those experiences, whether we're in front of our students or bringing people to critique our students or critique our conducting or be part of who we are, we're afraid to grow. How are we going to kind of how I've always viewed it? I'm trying to reach people. I can remember asking Michael Adelson, who used to be a studio conductor for the New York Phil, to help me with conducting. I still think I do some things really well, and still some things I struggle with, because I just think that's the nature of being a good conductor. You're passionate about your craft.
What did you ask Michael Adelson? Do you remember?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you remember what kind of things you asked Michael Adelson?
We did a clinic with him in New York, and so he came to a studio and he got me to watch my bands, and I conducted, and then he took over, and he was just so expressive with his baton. Mm-hmm. You remember he gets a chance to work with the New York Philharmonic, maybe one of the best orchestras in the world. Mm-hmm. And so you can be a different musician and artist on the podium. And I wanted that artistry to translate to high school kids. And so I asked him point blank, would you be willing to? And so we communicated on and off, and I brought my band back another time, and he critiqued me in front of the kids, and that was, it was humbling and thrilling for my kids to watch me go through that, thrilling down, but great because he was just such a great mentor and a human being. We still communicate, not often as much as we should. I don't think he's with the New York Phil anymore, but we've had him to the orchestra program. He conducted orchestras for a virtual concert this past month, and he's just a good human being. Having Professor Reynolds critique my conducting as a young band director when I was 25 was huge, and we've maintained a pretty good relationship, and he's worked with my bands almost every year, and me as a conductor. But he always opens up every rehearsal with, okay, everybody, I'm going to conduct this much different than Mr. Leach. I'm going to conduct it right. And so that's, you know, while that's humbling, he's absolutely true. I'm just, you know, a person who's just trying to get better with my kids, and get better as a conductor, musician, and person. And I think I've had some fortunate experiences. I work with professional musicians in the summer and weekend warriors that are just amazing in Canada and just good human beings. And I just want to try to make sure that when I show up in front of them, I'm prepared to help them succeed. And I guess that's just my goal.
Yeah, I think that from my experience, seeing you strive to get better every day, it rubs off on the students. And I think it fosters a really positive atmosphere and a great program. And it's one of the many things that you do to kind of make people excited and have a positive environment. So
that's, at the end of the day, if it's not fun, is it really worth doing?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's not hard work. That's different.
Yeah.
You know, people always say, oh, you're saying band should be about fun. Yeah, fun, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't work hard. I mean, the joy comes from the success, as well as the bad jokes in between each break. You know, how many times have you heard me talk about Russians?
Yeah.
Those are constant reminders.
Or Slovakians.
Slovakians, yeah, or dragons. Yeah, those things that we talk about.
Oh, yeah.
They're ways to kind of lighten the mood, but they have an important moment, you know, to talk about what our tendencies are as musicians. And so we take those moments to be jovial and fun. And I don't have to, you know, berate some poor kid because he's slowing down. I could work it into a positive. And so I think that's just kind of my life work, is trying to figure out a way to keep things in a positive moment, even if we're trying to face things that are hard to deal with emotionally. I mean, the music that we're doing this year deals with some pretty traumatic situations in our histories of our country, but that doesn't mean we can't be proud and happy and have it be a positive experience while we grapple with some more difficult things. There's two pieces of music that we're doing. Of Our New Day Begun talks about the massacre down in North Carolina. And I've talked about Omar Thomas before. I think he's just genius, and he wraps this around the African American national anthem. And I just think he does some powerful stuff with it. And then we also talk about the Mother Revolution, which is the start of the gay pride movement. And those were tough times in our country, tough times in the world, especially if you're of the LGBTQ community. And so I think we're in a better place. We still have a long way to go. I think we as a planet have a long way to go, getting people to work together and understanding that our differences are what make us better. But I think, you know, we do that as artists quickly. I mean, we embrace difference much faster than standard people, because we see people for their art, not necessarily for their, you know, what their outward appearances and what their preferences are different from their art. And so I think we embrace art much quicker.
Yeah.
At least I hope so.
That seems like it's going to be a really fascinating event.
I hope so.
And one that's very meaningful. So
I hope so.
For my final question, how do you think COVID is going to change the scope of not only music education, but education as a whole? Do you think things will kind of go back to the way they were before COVID in education, or do you think that people like educators and administrators are going to use this opportunity to look back and see maybe how do you think it's going to grow?
You know, you pose a challenging question, I think, to all of us in education. My hope is that they now realize, I think, and we've talked about this early on in the interview, that people realize education is more than just disseminating information to kids. It's all the things that go into the educational environment inside a classroom, inside a building, that you can't duplicate from a computer. You can't. It's physically wonderful to say, okay, we don't have to pay for buildings. We don't have to pay for teachers. We can just set a kid in front of a computer and they can listen to somebody from, you know, one guy teach everybody in America geometry. That seems very fiscally sound.
Yeah. It's
horrible for a child. And so how do we create community? How do we create collaborative nature of problem solving? How do we create at the end of 12 years of public education, or 16 years of public education, or 18 years of public school education, how do we have a great human being compassionate, kind, caring, intelligent, problem solving at the end. And so I think what I hope comes out of this is they realize how important the building-based education is for the health of a child and a nation, and that they realize that's got to be something that they prioritize. What things they did figure out was, of the economic engines, education's in the top 10, because if we don't exist, all the other economic engines kind of fail because they have to take care of their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's hope that gets better, and that they realize what education really does is about teaching people how to be good people, how to work together, how to not be offensive, how to solve problems in an environment when you disagree, how to disagree amicably and give and take. How's that happen? Right now we're in a hard time in this world. America is not alone in its divisiveness and the politicization of a virus. I mean, we have done a pretty bad job about that. And how do we turn that around? And I think we've politicized education. And I think that we can take that out and make education all about helping kids. And yep, all those things cost money, but everything costs money. And how are we gonna wrestle with that as a country? And so I hope that gets better. I think the virus has changed a lot of things, so we'll see kind of the impact. I hope people realize how important education is, and that it becomes much more. I don't necessarily need to have endless amounts of money. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this becomes an important part of the budget process.
Yeah.
More than an afterthought.
Well, I can definitely say that you played an instrumental role in my experience as a student and as my evolution as just a person throughout high school and currently. And you're such a great mentor, not only to me, but to all your students. And I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for joining me on my podcast.
I'm honored and thrilled you invited me, Ethan, and I hope for you the best. Happy holidays to your family. I hope you guys had a great time together, sharing candles, all the good stuff, and that you guys have a happy new year. And may 2021 find you with a renewed sense of hope, my friend, because I think we all need it.
You too.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Leach.
Be good.